Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something you don't often get to see, but more get to hear about or get secondhand. That is watching supposed knowledge workers in a high, knowledge intensive area of work, watching them today go about their work, go about their project, how they organize it, how they plan it, how they execute it, how they move the project along the production line, as it were. Now, just to give you the background, the company I have a share in was sort of roped into doing some work. The CEO, he's a white guy, but he's gay, and he's just got the right sort of buddies in the big money end of town, and they parachuted him into this outfit as a CEO, and he sort of sees it as like a vanity project. He's there to swan around like the big man, but he really doesn't know what he's doing. He would never admit to that, and would rather die than be exposed as someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But anyway, he brings us in. Now, I could tell by the way he was explaining the work that needed to be done and how vague he wanted to make the contract. He really didn't know, but he was this outfit had been given the responsibility of doing a certain body of work, and he didn't think the people he had in place could do it. They weren't up to it, was his view. And so he wanted to bring in outside help to just make sure that everything got across the line. So okay, fine. Now, I guess when you don't know what the job is and don't understand it, then you don't know what skill sets to apply to the work, and you don't know what skills and capabilities you have because you can't assess any of it. You don't know, what the people you already have in place are capable of or not capable of. So there's a lot of things going wrong here that really are part of the modern management era. Typically, not always. I mean, they're all, it wasn't perfect in the past, but typically you would have at least one, if not more, people in place who'd been hired on merit and who did understand how to do this work and what was needed to get it done, and how the work needs to be sequenced and what skills applied at what stage, at what sequence of the work, and so on. So now it was pretty apparent that these people didn't exist at this organization. So the CEO was really reaching down 2 or 3 levels of management into sort of the work group level of things. And I don't know why. I think it was an aggrandizement thing of, making himself look and sound important, and he wanted to be the, I roll my sleeve, like he was making phrases to us all the time, like, I'm the sort of CEO that, I don't sit here in the office. I get out there and I roll my sleeves up and get my hands dirty just like everyone else. And you could tell that it was an affectation rather than an actual grasp, an actual contribution. If anything, his desire to get involved was just going to get in the way and fuck things up, which is, by the way, what was happening. So the opportunity came along, and I was only there for really a brief part of the first, one of the earlier parts of the meeting one day, and some of my colleagues and some of the subcontractors we'd got were then going to go on into the work group and get this done. And so I finished my little bit, and I was about to go, and then I thought, hey, wait a minute, I think I might actually sit. I want to see how this unfolds, in real time, right in front of me, in this what was already shaping up. It's quite a mismanaged project or body of work. So anyway, go along and find that. So I'm sitting. I don't want to affect anything, so I don't say anything that's going to, push anything in one direction or another, or ask a question that might cause, the natural flow of events not to go as they would have. So I sit there and just stay stum and smile and nod whenever appropriate, just so I can watch it happen. But this is I'm mentioning this only because it's a classic case, in my view, of what is happening everywhere across the affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion business world of today. There is no one there who knows what they're doing. Now, not that there aren't people that have small subsets of capability, and maybe they are sort of adequate in that. That was harder to tell in time, certainly, that I had there. But what was going on was, without getting into the weeds of it all, what was going on was that there was no one there who there was various contractual obligations that were part of the process. No one had read the contract. Can you believe that? They're engaging in a body of work that if things go wrong, the legal ramifications would be huge, but and the financial obligations that would flow from it would be huge. But they had nobody there who'd actually read, not that didn't understand that was the case as well, but no one had actually read the contractual obligations of the work they had to perform. And this was staggering. And yet no one had even thought of it. The CEO hadn't thought of it. and I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted to watch. Now, their perception of the work to be done was a kind of a quick guess as to what was needed, and then taking a very minimalist view of that work. Some of the people that were involved on their side, that were employees of them, were really sort of public servanty type people who were trying to retrofit the work to be done into their own skill set, rather than see, well, this is the work that needs to be done. Rather than do that, they were retrofitting it. So they were minimizing it themselves and cutting down on the work to be done, and thus taking shortcuts and leaving things out that should have been addressed but weren't being addressed. Now, there were a supervisor had been appointed to sort of oversee it in the company, who knew nothing about it. They didn't even understand from word one what was going on. But they would, that was a straight white guy. But also there was an issue that the people involved had certifications. So they'd been to, they had a certification to do this or that or the next thing. And some of it was, well, no, all of it really was very, very sort of affirmative action type courses. Somebody might sing a song in the middle of the project. Therefore, we have to have someone with a degree in the music of Beyonce or something like, they had that sort of attitude to the certification process. Were people certified to do this work that was over there? Well, that wasn't an issue. They would look at a word that would appear somewhere in the contract that may say, sunshine, for example. I'm just making a simple example here. And so they would go off and find someone who's got a certification in sunshine, or appoint them or put them in the work group, even though it had nothing to do with sunshine. Sunshine was just some incidental word that appeared somewhere. So these are the sorts of things that they were doing. There was no one there who was actually, nor was there anybody there who was bringing the whole project together. Say, okay, this is the work that needs to be done. So people had certifications in areas that weren't relevant. The people that did have the expertise in certain areas were assigned to other parts of the project where their expertise was irrelevant, or just simply didn't apply. The most experienced, but there were a couple of quite experienced people there who probably could have pulled the project together on the customer side of things, but they were assigned junior positions because they didn't have a certain certification that someone else had decided was needed, but actually wasn't needed. So it's got a real sort of flavour of just bumbling amateurs, just bumping into each other, tripping over each other, trying to get this work done. So I let this all go, and again I was watching there. Probably got it close on a couple of hours of watching this go back and forth, and these idiot, these underqualified, I don't call them idiots, these underqualified people were doing this, trying to, even that they weren't actually interested in doing the work. They were just interested in doing enough to escape any sort of responsibility. And nor did any of them want responsibility. None of this was another interesting part about this. none of the people in the work group, this is our client sort of thing, none of the people in the work group wanted the word responsibility sent them, caused panic-stricken looks on their faces. So they wanted to avoid all of that sort of stuff and do an absolute minimum of the minimum to get away with it. And nobody was qualified to do it. The people who were qualified, because they didn't have certifications, were actually made the juniors. In fact, the most qualified person, in my opinion, just watching what was going on, the most qualified person was given the job of the most junior job, or the most junior task in the whole project. And so it was actually inverse. The people who didn't know what they were doing were at the top, running things and organising, and you go here, you go there, and the most capable people were at the bottom, doing the minimal sort of sweep the floor and push the broom type work. And that inversion was in itself. I mean, how could that actually happen? How can the most qualified people be given the least relevant tasks in the project? But that's sort of how. Now, the people that did have certifications, and certifications were considered quite highly by these folks, and they're younger people. I don't, there's hardly anyone over the age of 30. So they all perceived certification as, if you like, a moral sort of thing. I'm highly educated because I have an affirmative action certification, even though the certifications weren't necessarily relevant to the work. Well, some of it, I suppose. The majority of the people who had certifications hadn't passed some sort of rigorous test or whatever. They just attended a series of information sessions and then were given a certificate at the end of it, more like a participation trophy than a qualification of any sort. But there they were. And so the work they were doing or trying to do was very much a reflection of the minimalist. I remember seeing this on a slideshow that was in this course that I attended. But they never had to pass anything, or again, there was no rigor in this. It wasn't an exacting, rigorous education, far from it. So they're running around with these certificates, these certifications, thinking that they're hot shit. But in reality, they don't know anything. They know so little that they can't even work out what they don't know. So this was again, I just sat there and watched all this unfold, and I was aghast. Now, part of the problem was the CEO, because he didn't know what skills were needed, not needed, how they could be applied, and what didn't know what to ask for. So there wasn't really much for us to do in the sense that they hadn't understood the skills that were needed. So unless we assessed the project separately, which we ended up doing, by the way, then we couldn't say, okay, you're missing this, and this. And we need to. So we thought the biggest thing they need is to understand the actual terms of the contract they've signed and agreed to, because they haven't got a clue. Apart from the fact they haven't really read it, what they've read they don't understand anyway. So we highlighted to them, well, after the end of this 2 hours has gone by, look, this is really your biggest exposure. You need this, and you need to have a meeting with them and ascertain this. This needs to be gone through. Here are the points you need to clarify, and then you need to do this, and this is the sequence that you do it in. That was the primary area, and then they could reallocate skills that they already had but weren't applying correctly and were applying out of sequence. So if skills A needed to be applied first in the sequence of events, they were actually putting A at the end instead of at the beginning where they should have. So we were able to go through this in the end. But it was jaw dropping just looking at the ineptitude, like across the board. It wasn't just that just the odd person here or there didn't know what they were doing. Some of them were reasonably earnest and pleasant people. It wasn't that they were assholes or anything like that. But the ineptitude, the misapplication of skills, resources, and capabilities was, again, in my view at least, jaw-dropping. But this is how it. This is probably the first opportunity I've had to get right in on the weeds, amongst the weeds in a work group and watching them in action. But this is the sort of thing that on a second-hand or indirect basis, I'm seeing it all the time. And how is it possible that so many unqualified people, so many could be in these positions? That's the rub. Not that you occasionally come across people who don't know what they're doing, or they're kind of, they've got an idea, but they're just not that good at it. There are so many of these people out there, not just at the work group level or the mid-level supervisor or manager, but at the CEO level and on down. And in my view, the cost of the business community, the cost of society, the cost of productivity is immense, and we're all paying that price. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.